Pranams at the lotus feet, Sai Ram, and greetings from Prashanti Nilayam. I'm very happy to announce that recently we had the distinct honor and privilege of recording a conversation with Mr. Justice Venkatachaliah, who is a distinguished legal luminary of this country. The Justice, whose full name is Manipalli Narayan Rao Venkatachaliah, was born in the year 1929, and he graduated first with a degree in science and then a degree in law. He entered the legal profession in the year 1951. He has had a very long and distinguished legal career, and he served as a judge of the Karnataka High Court from the year 1975 to the year 1987, at which point Mr. Justice Venkatachaliah was elevated to the Supreme Court. And he later became the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. That was in the year 1993. Justice Venkatachaliah retired as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of India in the year 1994. The fact that he retired as Chief Justice did not mean that his career came to an end. He's a very active man and still continues to be so at the ripe age of 84 or 85. And he's been active in many areas like human rights, revision of the Constitution, improvement of governance, restoration of national values, and so on. Understandably, he has also been associated with education, and he has been the Chancellor of many central universities. I should not forget to mention that since June 2013, Justice Venkatachaliah has been serving as the Chancellor of Swami's University, Sri Sathya Sai Institute of Higher Learning. It is only to be expected that a person with a distinguished career like Justice Venkatachaliah has received many, many awards, but we shall not go into them. What I want to tell you is that we have recorded an extensive conversation with Justice Venkatachaliah on this topic, evolution of law and the judicial system, and the role values have played in this process. I now invite you to see the recording that we made some time ago. This recording will also be available as an audio over Radio Sai, and I hope the transcript will also be available on the website of Radio Sai. Thank you and welcome to the viewing. Greetings to you, sir, and we are really very happy to welcome you in our midst. I am dying to get off. I have a big list of points to discuss with you. And knowing my past, going by my past experience, I'm sure I won't get through half of it. But anyway, let's get started. Let me begin with...
You cautioned me to be brief.
Beg your pardon?
You cautioned me to be very brief in my
Not
responses.
really. I want to really sample a wide range of topics.
Please. Thank you for the kind invitation.
Thank you. It's our pleasure and privilege. Sir, correct me if I'm wrong, but my belief is most of the judicial, constitutional, and legal systems today in most countries are to some extent or the other based on what prevails in the West. And if my understanding is correct, the Western legal system had its origin in Roman law and British law. I may be wrong, but kindly walk us through the early days.
You are right, sir. We have what we call an Anglo-Saxon system of justice administration. There are two great schools of judicial thought in regard to systems. One is, as you rightly said, about the Roman system. The old 12 tables, as we call them, Napoleonic Code. We have two broad systems. So one is what is called the inquisitorial civil law system, which prevails in Europe. The other is the common law adversarial system. That is the British tradition. This adversarial system has grown in rugged isolation from Europe. The whole of Europe is civil law system. The philosophy of, the basic philosophy of it is, in the Anglo-Saxon, the adversarial common law system, the judge acts as an umpire. Whenever you say, how is that? Is that out or not out? But in the civil law system that prevails in Europe, there he takes a more active part in the resolution of the dispute. He gets into the ring and smears himself with the dust of the ring, and he is both an inquisitor as well as a judge. That's the difference between the two. And the systems have grown in importance in their own way. India has adopted the adversarial common law system, and the common law, inheritance of the common law is the importance of the judge as both an adjudicator and a lawmaker. He plays, the moment, one of the important factors of it is law precedent. When you have decided something earlier, this is the most crucial, perhaps the only important difference between impact of decision making and successive cases in future cases. In adversarial system, the common law system, one swallow will make a summer. Supposing you lay down the Supreme Court in England, the Supreme Court in India lays down a rule. It becomes a law for future cases. In the doctrine of precedent is differently understood in the civil law system in Europe. It is the trend of decisions, a series of decisions, or in the pattern of the old jurisconsults, the same thing, the trend of decisions will decide the precedent value. Here, one decision can make a precedent. There are many other aspects of the merits and demerits of these two systems.
Can I ask a question, since you talked
Yes.
about these two systems? What is the role played by Magna Carta, which was an important landmark in the British history?
Magna Carta has been interpreted differently.
I think you must explain to our audience what is Magna Carta. They wouldn't know.
See, King John, the landed
12th century.
1225. 1225 is the year of the Magna Carta, the Great Charter, as it was called. It is now interpreted in terms of freedom because, but then it was the fight against the landed gentry, against the king, royal prerogative. Royal prerogative was such that people, particularly landowners, wanted their pound of flesh, and they cornered the king. And in Runnymede, that's why they say, from Runnymede to the scaffold at the Whitehall, we have taught our kings a lesson. They have not misbehaved since. This is one of the ways in which the hapless king was forced to concede some rights to this thing. But in the process, there are very interesting fallout in favor of liberty, human liberty and human dignity. It was not intended, but it was to control the royal prerogative, what they call the divine right of kings. How the divine right of kings had to be trammeled by hopes and aspirations of the people. Then it happened in England that there was a fight to the people against royalty. That fight, from the superstition of the divine right of kings, came the superstition of the divine right of parliament. Parliament became supreme. So people had to fight against that. And the outcome of that is the system of human rights law. Human rights law and constitutional fundamentals, the fundamental rights which will be a limitation on the power of parliaments themselves. This is a very, very interesting 1215 to the modern day, the evolution of this concept of a fight between those in authority and those who are under authority, under the supervision of kings and parliaments. This interaction, this is perhaps the most interesting civilizational moment
Now that you have mentioned this, it gives me a chance to ask a couple of questions. The first is, in the 18th century, we had the French Revolution and the US, American Revolution, as it's called, which led to the birth of what is the modern United States. And in both cases, monarchy was overthrown and a republic was established. And there were also certain landmark decisions taken about fundamental rights, as you call it. In France, it was equality, liberty, and fraternity.
Yeah.
And then in America, they had the Bill of Rights, followed by First Amendment, and so on. Would you like to comment on that? My question is, did it make any difference to the evolution of justice, rights, the authority, triangle, and so on?
Absolutely. They are not mere episodic.
An endless saga.
Not episodic incidents. They are civilizational changes.
I see.
In fact, if you see the American Civil War, what Lincoln did.
Civil War, which led to the birth
of the Federation, Confederacy. A beautiful story about it. When they knew in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, Benjamin Franklin, who had worked ceaselessly, tirelessly for 4 months in the sweating heat of summer to bring about this declaration for this new constitution, the Philadelphia Convention. There's a painting on the wall. It was of a sun, either it was setting sun or a rising sun. It was difficult to make out. You couldn't interpret that because the setting is the same. So he waited endlessly for delegates to come and sign. They were slow to come. He saw the painting as a setting sun. Then delegates came and they signed the convention. Then the new hope came up. Then he reinterpreted the painting to say it is the mark of the rising sun. So the American experiment holds a great value for humanity in the sense. There are two things about it. Both sides of the Atlantic, the political philosophy is shaped by the Bible. In St. Augustine, on this side, said possession of wealth is a sin, based on the same Bible. On the other side, they said pursuit of happiness. That government is merely an arbitrator. Government is not going to rule us. Whenever we have disputes, they will come do the work of an arbitrator. You can't touch our property rights. Government has no right to interfere in our exercise of our rights. There's the extreme interpretation of the Bible there. Will Hutton wrote 2 beautiful books, The World We Are In, The State We Are in which he brings out...
Which century did he write this? Sorry if I'm ignorant.
This century, of course. Will Hutton was last century, the 20th century.
20th century.
Then he says how the same Bible was the foundation of 2 different schools of thought, one this side and the other side.
The Bible has 2 testaments, so you can always...
2 testaments, yes. This is the 3rd testament.
Now, which brings me back to Europe, and I raised this question for a specific reason. Bismarck in the 19th century brought together many independent states and created modern Germany. So if I'm not mistaken, that was one of the first examples of a nation state as opposed to an ethnic state or something like that. Now, did the emergence of the nation state make any change to the thinking regarding rights, liberties, etc.?
Yes, you see, that's a very important development. Emergence of the nation state had 2 significances. One is in international law. The princes were the actors on the stage. Nation state raised the high walls of domestic sovereignty. And that had its own implications internally as well as externally, outside world, in relation to the outside world. Bismarck, we know, the builder of modern Germany. Same in the middle of the most enlightened century, 20th century, the middle of 20th century, in the center of the cultural center of Europe, Hitler was born. Alan Bullock, who referred to Hitler's Germany, said street gangs came into the possession of the resources of a great modern state. And he added gutter came to power. And Hitler never ceased to boast that was by popular democratic vote. This happened in Germany. Take Germany again, this 4 decades later. The whole European Union was the result of the pioneering work of the great administrators of Germany. Helmut Kohl, he brought about the union of 2 Germanys. The most professional bank in the world predicted all kinds of adverse economic consequences of the unification. 2 unequals are brought in together in equal terms. You see an automobile in West Germany and an automobile in East Germany, they would represent 2 different civilizations altogether, but they were brought in together. That paved the way of what is today the modern European Union, economic union. And and Helmut said, I want a European roof over Germany, not a German roof over Europe.
That's a great statement.
And then in 1998, I think September, he lost for Schroeder, his election. Then when he retired, the crowd gave an ovation. They shouted, Helmut, Helmut for half an hour. Then somebody said his retirement from German politics is something like the Alps announcing their departure.
Oh my God.
That was the great contribution that was done. That's a civilizational change in political philosophy. Actually, the landscape of politics changed with the emergence of the European Union. And of course, it has its problems because you must see the background. Apart from the 2 great powers, Soviet Union on the one side, United States on the other, the 3rd major power in the world was American investment in Europe, the Marshall Plan,
yes,
and other things.
Right.
And many countries, for example Italy, changed their revenue laws, many of the laws to be able to use that kind of aid to good purpose. In India, that's an example. Whenever some kind of great changes occur, the substratum of legal system has to be upgraded so that it will sustain the kind of purpose that we are entering into anew. This is the problem of countries which have great leadership, countries who don't have such enlightened leadership. This is the difference between it. Leadership makes every difference at the critical point of crossover point in civilizational change. In civilizational crossover points, you see 3 factors have occurred. One is demographic explosion, infusion of a new source of energy into the economy. 3rd is good leadership. This has decided whether the crossover, civilizational crossover point has meant anything substantial for the nation.
But now I want to bring in a new element which is always there, namely technology.
And I'm
going to come to it via the Second World War. You see, after the Second World War, there were the Nuremberg trials. I still remember my schoolmaster reading out from New York Times about the trials.
No, I remember trials. Justice Jackson became the prosecutor. And he couldn't handle it. He was an American judge.
Yes.
He couldn't handle the trial. The witnesses, the accused were so powerful, so brilliant, that they had to change him and import an English barrister. Then that changed the whole history of the Nuremberg trials.
I'm going to lead on to a question arising out of that. We know what happened after the trials. All the Nazis were executed and so on. But before the war concluded, the Germans and the British firebombed Dresden. A whole night, 5,000, 6,000 bombers bombed, and nearly 15,000 people were burned to death. The same happened in Tokyo, following which America ended the war with 2 atom bombs on Nagasaki and Truman. If you look at the history of the atom bomb, which I know something about as a nuclear scientist, when the bomb was tested, till then the scientists did not know much about it. They did not know whether it would work. It was fearsome. So many of them, in fact, most of them, except the top, did not know it. They knew it for the first time. They wrote a petition to Truman saying, you must demonstrate the bomb on a unpopulated island and let the Japanese give them a warning. But Truman said, no, I'm going to have it dropped. And the targets were essentially selected by the military based on their own considerations, including weather. And they said, if people die, it will save our lives. Ultimately, Hiroshima and Nagasaki together took a toll of about nearly 200,000 people, which is a minimum. So now the question is this. What happened in the concentration camps was unforgivable. It was a crime against humanity, and people got their justice, their sentence. But here were large numbers of civilians who were killed and annihilated, literally. But that was it victor's justice, or is there any legal paper justification, or is it something that has to be decided only by questions of morality? How do people react to this? Because today science has become far more powerful. We have megaton bombs which will kill hundreds of times more than what Hiroshima and Nagasaki did. And there are thousands of such bombs floating around.
I think you have touched perhaps the rawest nerve in civilization. You remember when the controlled fission was achieved in Los Alamos in 1944, there was that great scientist, Enrico Fermi,
Yes.
who worked, he would say, the morning the whistle would go on for the office commencement. Oh, office whistle, Oppenheimer's whistle, he would say. Enrico Fermi was perhaps one of the chief architects of that. When the successful fission, controlled fission was achieved, he sent a telegram to Truman, to White House, in a coded term. The telegram read, the Italian navigator has reached this strange shore. Inhabitants are friendly. That was the coded message that was sent. When this fat boy and little man, little boy and fat man, the two bombs that were dropped, that the most, perhaps the most despicable misuse of power of the perverted human mind on innocent population to demonstrate your war prowess, that step was not necessary.
But they said, if there was an invasion, thousands of Americans will die, so we saved American lives. That was their argument. It remains so to this day.
If it is to be saved on that kind of price, it was not worth saving. It was, if you can, actually, you have the Pearl Harbor thing. Then all the Japanese third generation citizens of America.
Yes, I know. They were all interned and sent to camps.
They were all sent to concentrate. They called relocation camps, relocation centers. If Hitler had done it, they would have called concentration camps. If America did it, it was called the relocation camps. And that came before the American Supreme Court. And there is a lot of debate about it. And there is a lot of aftermath after that case. See, this, the whole history of the 40s, and when we went, law of the jungle prevailed in the Second World War. Jim Corbett wrote, people who use this word are misusing it. They don't know what the law of the jungle is. There's no wanton killing in jungle. And he gave a story of a well-fed tiger was basking in the sun after a good meal. A goat kid, he wrote that, and the photograph is also there in his book. A goat kid, small thing, he didn't know the difference between a tiger and an elephant. It came and began to play with the tiger. It began to scratch his ears, touch his face. The fellow pushed him off twice. The child would come again back to him. Then he got fed up and walked away and slept somewhere else. By one hit of the paw, it would have annihilated that thing. He didn't do it. He said, this is the law of the jungle. It's only for the sake of survival they do this. And secondly, these are something which are unforgettable episodes of human misbehavior. And who, in whatever language you may put, whatever justification you may provide, nobody internally is convinced that what you have done to Hiroshima and Nagasaki is justifiable in human terms. It is perhaps the why you could have done it in a desert in a
That's what they wanted. The
yes,
scientists
yes.
made an appeal. In fact, a number of American scientists afterwards dropped out of the entire nuclear
Yes,
defense.
yes.
Many of them said, we will never again be involved with design of the nuclear weapons. I want, if you may, sir, to change the topic and come back to this country, which had its own legal system in all of it thousands of years. But with the advent of the British, we got introduced to what is now called British law. But if I'm not mistaken, where the civil code was concerned, a lot of what was traditional, like the Hindu law, got incorporated into it in some measure, like with respect to marriage, succession, property, and so on and so forth. So we had here a very interesting hybrid of the old and the new, which is sort of somewhat unusual in relation to the evolution of other histories. You might like to comment on that.
See, this is something which is a very imaginative assimilation. The substantive law, personal law of the Hindus and the Muslims.
Whom will you give the credit?
I would give it to the British thinkers, jurists who introduced this, because they knew the sentiment of the local people. System of administration was changed. King was the dispenser of justice. He had the advisors, the Sathas, experts
in the olden
days. And the evolution of it, Sengupta has written beautifully on the evolution of the ancient Indian law, Indian legal system. And how it, for example, you take this. If the legal system here was the same kind of royal system that we had with the Pandits sitting there with their caste marks and a dais and dispensing justice, how would you have integrated with the world and the litigation, international litigation? In 1944, Ambedkar was chairman of the Hindu Law Amendment Committee. It took such a long time to introduce changes in personal law. And the system was the adversarial modern system. Law administered there, Muslims had their own law administered there according to that system of substantive rights and liabilities. Hindus had the same thing. The Parsis had the Christians had the same thing. Their marriage laws were different, succession laws were different. And all that was tried to be, within a span of 30 years, the kind of change that was made was amazing. I must tell you that when some amount of positivism is necessary to survive in these days, dark days of gloom. Some kind of, but if I think of what is positive in modern India, the legal system is there, but the way it is worked is terrible. In fact, one jurist in England said, I would rather have Russian laws administered according to British procedure than British procedure in accordance with British laws according to Russian procedure. And one judge said, the system of law is 100 years behind the needs of time. The judges are 200 years behind the needs of time. The courts are 300 years behind the needs of time. And one, I think, Devlin said, if British legal methods, if the British legal methods were as antiquated as its legal methods, Britain should have been a bankrupt country long ago. This is what he said.
Now, I want to talk about rights and responsibilities, because responsibilities and duties are an integral part of our tradition. Our constitution guarantees a lot of rights, which is right and appropriate, and as it should be. But I believe in the 70s there was a committee headed by Swaran Singh to talk about national duties of the citizen. But nothing came of it in substantively.
No, the fundamental duties factors
is it obligatory or mandatory?
It is obligatory as a declaration of the liability. It is there. for enforcement of it, that to be enforced through various laws. For example, right to vote, right to respect environment. All these are fundamental duties. We have the list of fundamental duties. We have the legislation enforcing those duties, how we should not pollute lakes or forests and things like that. These are all carried out through legislations. The philosophy is declared. For example, we say untouchability is abolished in India, Article 17. It won't abolish by itself.
That I know.
Then a law is necessary. So the whole legal system is not one isolated constitutional doctrine or one procedural law or one substantive law which you administer in court. It is a combination of constitutional values, common law, that is non-statutory law, then legislation. The three things are complementary to each other for a judicial system. The combination of all the three things are collectively, comprehensively apprehended as the judicial system.
That is a very interesting thing. Some years ago, I believe it was the year 2006, I chanced to see an article in the Hindu written by Justice Dinakaran of the Madras High Court. It was titled Law and Justice. And he says there, the excellence of justice consists precisely in the fact that it is compounded of truth, goodness and beauty. Truth is the foundation of justice, goodness is the end, and beauty constitutes its essential quality. Human law is a rivulet that flows from natural law, which in turn flows from the eternal law. I was fascinated by this because that is what Bhagwan Baba used to tell us. There is a moral law governing the universe and it comes from the Almighty. And Gandhi says the same thing, the law and the lawgiver are one, in his famous speech in 1931, which he recorded when he went for the second round table conference. Now there is a reason why I am mentioning all this, because our founding fathers gave us the motto, Sathya Jayate, which I don't think any schoolboy knows today, or for that matter, schoolgirl. In the first convocation of our institute, of which you are now the chancellor, Mr. Palkiwala gave the address, and this is what he said about Sathya. He explained to the audience what is Sathya Dharma and all that. I will just read out what he says about Sathya. I am sure you will find it very interesting and illuminating. He says, you will not find a word in English or French or German that will give you the full equivalent of the concept of Sathya. Sathya means truth, as in the maxim, there is no religion higher than truth. But Sathya also means being true to yourself. It connotes intellectual integrity and acting according to your conscience. These various nuances of the word Sathya have not been encapsulated in a single English word. In our world today, truth seems to be in the background, and it is falsehood that is in the ascendant, and yet you should never despair of truth. And then he recites a poem, truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. And yet that scaffold sways the future, and behind the dim unknown standeth God beneath the shadow. Now all this makes sense if truth is declared as an absolute value and not a relative value, which is what the former Pope referred to as the tyranny of relativism. So I have the following question, sir. We have a secular state, but we also have the national motto Satyameva Jayate. The Satya as described by Palkiwala, for example, and which our founding fathers seem to have endorsed via the national motto, clash with the notion of a secular state. That is my question.
Sir, this is a deeply philosophical speculation. In the Mahabharata, there is an episode, Jignasu goes to his Brahmin teacher and asks him, is a fact equivalent to truth? A factual incident, does it qualify itself to be called the truth? The master says, I can't answer this. The only man who can answer you is the Dharmavyadha, who administers the law in the jungle. He is a seller of meat. You go to him. Then when he goes there, he says, a factual event is not necessarily by itself equivalent to truth. for an event, fact, to qualify itself to be called the truth, it must possess one quality. In the Vanaparva they say, Yad sarvabhuta hitam atyantam tat satyam iti dharana viparyeya kruto adharma pashya dharmasya sukshmatam. How subtle dharma, truth is. What do you test dharma on the touchstone of truth, or truth on the touchstone of dharma? He says there is no absolute truth. What you perceive as truth will be a falsehood unless you test it at the touchstone of dharma. Whether the touchstone is truth or touchstone is dharma. The truth contains one component which is a factual existence of a thing that by itself does not culminate in its ascending to the level of truth. So the relative, for example, the whole story of Mahabharata is an illustration of the relative value of truth. What is dharma, what is adharma? And when the war was won, the battle, Bhimsen won the battle by cheating, by breaking, in violation of the rules of the game. Yudhishthira says, I don't want this victory, I don't want this kingdom. It's all won by chicane. The answer that he gives is the most beautiful thing. Krishna's answer to him, it's not your kingdom or your life, it is the society at large. How does it survive? How do we do this? For example, these are things which are perpetual enigmas, and there is a lot of subjective element in resolving these things. You can't get over it. That's the reason why proper education, cultivation of values within yourself is the most important thing. That's why that is, if you don't have that perception of means and ends, a proper perception of means and ends, what are the means meant for, what are the ends you want to achieve, that comes out of true education, enlightened, broad education, as Sathya Sai education means. You intrinsically, intuitionally, you know the difference of whether this fact can qualify itself to be called the truth. This is always eternally relative. And to say Satyam, Shivam, Sundaram is all right. Truth, beauty and goodness are ideals towards which we go by process of approximation. It's ever receding boundary. As you advance, it goes back.
But my question is it not therefore wise and also diligent and prudent to accept the existence of a goal? Because ends and means must have a goal, otherwise there is no ends and means.
The point is, this is where Whitehead, Alfred not Whitehead, he said, growth of knowledge without a corresponding growth of wisdom is a sure recipe for disaster. A wave of destruction can raid on the back of a sunbeam of knowledge. And what is the right wisdom? If you make darkness your light and evil your good. And where do you find this, whether it is wise or unwise? What is the test? Ultimately, the test is Atma Santushti Ravachanti. The conscience inside, it is common to everyone. The same divinity is the indwelling divinity in every individual. This is where you arouse it. And that's the theory of knowledge itself in the ultimate analysis as Baba conceived it. You see, there's a beautiful lecture by one of the finest scientists, neurologists, Vinay Ramchandran, who's a professor who teaches in Berkeley University.
Yes, I've heard of him.
In one of his Wreath lectures, it is titled this, Believing is Seeing, not Seeing is Believing. And he says, this is the theory that every piece of knowledge is within you. You require another knowledge to take out that knowledge. And what is that knowledge by which you take out the thing? This has been in metaphoric terms, it is described in the various Upanishads and various textbooks of various religions. Unless you know, for example, he gives this example. You see a flower. The theory in ophthalmology, physiology of vision, the theory is the cornea acts as the lens, the retina as the screen, the flower is projected there, and the optic nerve takes that stimulation, that kind of impulse into one of the 37 visual cortices in the back of your brain. And when this goes there, that visual cortex says this is a flower. He says it's stupid. You see the vision and the retina, it's all scattered. The petal is somewhere, the stem is somewhere, the pistil is somewhere else. There's nothing. There's no vision of a flower. And you take the same stimulation is taken through the optic nerve to the back of the head. That part of the brain is no better, that has no brain of its own. Unless the individual has known that it is a flower, the brain doesn't say it's a flower. Where does this theory of modern theory of perception?
No, then it comes to the following question, which is going to, following point, which is going to lead to my next question. We have a tradition and a culture, and that culture, from that we have derived certain beliefs, like for example, intrinsic knowledge, towards which we aspire, and which is immanent in us and which helps us to cognize better and better, understand better and better, and temper knowledge with wisdom, so on and so forth. That being the case, and that being our heritage, we have a certain, I suppose, entitlement to revere it and protect it. Now, this brings me to the currently controversial book, The Hindus and Alternative History by Wendy Doniger, I believe, of Harvard. And this has been banned, or at least there has been a protest, and Penguin India under protest has decided to withdraw it. And the section of the law is supposed to be 295A of the Penal Code. Yes. But Penguin International has issued a statement, and I will quote, "We believe that the Indian Penal Code will make it increasingly difficult for any Indian publisher to uphold international standards of free expression without deliberately placing itself outside the law." So my question is, the issue of rights, patents, fair trade, etc., all these seem to be decided by a set of countries that have the international cloud. Under these circumstances, is law also globalized and decided by one or more global tribal chiefs, and we, who came late into the scene, have no right or entitlement?
Sir, this is a very complex issue.
I know, that's why I'm putting it to a learned person like you.
Complex issue between emotion and reason. This is a conflict between emotion. Heterodoxy has been a part of Indian spiritual tradition, religious tradition. When Sri Ramchandra obeyed his father and went to the forest, Rishi Jabali went to him and told him that what a fool you are. You see, where is this filial obligation? Here, it's an interpretation of a scholar and a book. And the whole of our epics are not historical presentations. They are metaphors. The characters represent the conflicting interests in society, conflicting configurations of human diversity. And human diversity is not a matter of dissent, it's a matter of freedom. And the whole Ravana itself, the very character of Ravana himself is the argument of the opposite side.
But my question is this, the state which is concerned with issues of law and order, if it perceives a threat to law and order as
actually this is one, there was a famous American case of liberty. Americans have a right to assemble peaceably and without arms. A group wanted to assemble without arms peaceably. Another group said it is a provocational fight. The state banned that meeting. Supreme Court said they are exercising their constitutional right. You should protect them and punish those who interfere with that right, not ban the exercise the right itself. This is the kind of thing that they, as a matter of fact, let light come from any side. It may be darkness, it may be light.
That I agree as a notion, but at the practical level, I mean, for example, it is of a known fact that if you say something about the Prophet and all that, it is bound to irritate people. They may be backward, whatever it is. And if that is done deliberately as an act of provocation, in the face kind of act, is it wise? It is like more like saying, I have my right, I have right to do what I want.
You must leave that to the administration with the concern with the responsibility of protecting peace and good order for the time being. There is a pragmatic dimension to it. Theoretical things don't work all the time, and ideological debates may not avoid communal holocausts. So those who have the responsibility of government must be allowed a little play at the joints.
Because I remember there is a Supreme Court judgment, fundamental laws don't exist in watertight compartments.
No, I mean, a clash of arms, laws are not silent or some such thing. The point is, there is this kind of absolute thing. We may put lives of people at stake, and state as the parents patria, the parent of the people, have a right to protect them. If two sons are fighting with daggers, they have a right. Who is right or who is not right is not the question. Who is wrong, who is right is not the question. The question is that fight itself is wrong, for whatever reason. So you must allow the state from time to time. The same thing will not happen. Perhaps the society is evolved and more tolerant and understand each other. The context is everything. In all these things, the context, the situation is everything. And I think you can't say this is absolutely right, this is absolutely wrong. There are always gray areas in human relations. You can't, this is not white and black. There are gray areas. These are all gray areas in which debate is necessary, but action must be left to the government in its wisdom to protect the life and limbs of people.
No, I want to come to an even grayer area or dark area. See, this concerns very recent developments in biology, which is called digital biology. And this goes far beyond anything that has been seen in humankind. Basically, today you can literally store a gene's data in a computer and tinker that data to create an entirely new gene that does not, code, genetic code which does not exist in nature. That is something that exists in a computer. However, I can take it out and synthesize in the laboratory, the chemical laboratory, in a test tube, a DNA that conforms to this code. So there is a physical DNA now, the like of which does not exist in nature. Man has created it. And experiments are going on in California, particularly, to put this in a cell and create a new cell which will make its own proteins according to the instructions. And it is within the realm of possibility to create a new life form. In principle, it can be taken further apart, further down the road. That will take a lot of resources, and meanwhile, law may intervene, and the public the consensus may say thus far and no further, and all that. But the question is, you have created a new life form. It has come out of human knowledge. Can life be patented? This is the kind of question that is now coming into the fore. As we know, recently the US Supreme Court has declared as null and void patenting segments of the gene. I followed that case very closely, but the European Union had not accepted it. Now I'm going to another issue to draw a parallel. When Nagasaki was devastated, it was devastated with plutonium, which is a man-made element, plutonium-239. And since then, humans have created in the laboratory elements heavier than 100. Of these, two are of commercial significance. One is plutonium-238, which is used in all spacecrafts where you need long-term power supply, and you can't have a big solar cell and all that. The Curiosity rover on Mars has got the biggest plutonium power supply built on Earth. I met the gentleman, Dr. Subbarao, who worked with Dr. Kalam way back when SLV-3 was launched. And the Voyager, which has gone outside the solar system into interstellar space, has a battery which is 20 years old. That is not patented. Californium-252 has not been patented, though it is used everywhere, in America at least, for neutron radiography. But now here, because of the great value in medical science, it may be patented. So the question is, law does not say anything. And there is one more question. A man asked, nobody has cloned a human being, though it can be. There is a self-imposed ban. Suppose you take a cell from me and clone me. Who is that person? Is it me, my brother, or my son?
This question, sir, I was chairman of a committee to draft ethical guidelines on biocentric research. Biocentric research. I gave a report.
Yes, sir.
There are 40 eminent doctors in our team. It is on that basis that the current scientific and ethics committees in research institutions are set up. This is between 91 and 2001, the decade of the genome. They went into the genome plan. That's also the decade of the brain. The research was undertaken for 10 years.
In fact, right now they are mapping the nerves in the brain.
Yes. There's a good deal of work that is going on. But our area of ignorance of the human brain and its functioning is expanding in proportion to our knowledge of it. Our ignorance is enhanced by our knowledge of it. The whole of this scientific idea is something like a small ball in the whole vast expanse of the unknown. The bigger the size of the ball, the greater the contact with the unknown. That's the only result, that you will expand your ignorance and contact with the unknown by expanding your knowledge of it. That's one side of it. But here, in regard to this, the dangers that it poses, there's a beautiful book written on it some 30 years ago. One is by Veeramantri, who became judge of the International Court of Justice, called the Slumbering Sentinels. Slumbering Sentinels. He said you can create a big workforce, an army or whatever kind of thing, by manipulating the genetic makeup to dull the brain for responses to pain and other things, and create an army which you can't suffer any pain. Human beings are in human forms, they are raised. And then another form will raise people for cannibalizing and harvesting parts. You dull their brains, they are no sensitive to pain and human emotions. They become emotionless, and then you grow them only to harvest and cannibalize their parts to put into human systems. This is, Veeramantri wrote about it. And then who is that? Alvin Toffler, he also predicated the possibilities of this some 30 years ago. It's now a stateable possibility. So far as duplication of human personality by taking a cell from him and developing it. You said human civilization, wisdom is not ripe to be able to receive this kind of development. And the laboratory experiments apart, actually to give patent rights for such things will be a great disaster for humanity. Not disaster for humanity. And you can have a few of these people have a form in which they develop these things, and you are playing God without the responsibility that God takes upon himself to protect the creation. There are two views of this creation. What they call teleological interpretation is one thing, the mechanistic interpretation is another thing. If you for life.
What about a humanistic interpretation?
The humanistic interpretation sometimes can become artificial. You are imposing your emotions on you are erecting your emotion to principles.
Humanistic can also be based on wisdom, can it not?
See, yes, there's no doubt about it at all. And that is what, for want of a better word, we call spiritual. For want of a better word, we call it spiritual. This is the state of human complexity, confusion in civilization today. But looking at it, man has managed itself not too badly, because see what you are asking. The very question that you have raised is the answer to many of these problems, that it has its own germ of a remedy for it. Wisdom, restraint, and control, imagination of the possible consequences, and protect future generations from the dangers of it. This is humanism. And don't go overboard with your intellect. It can be a self-defeating instrument. It's a self-stultifying instrument. And intellect without wisdom can be a self-stultifying instrument. Don't trust it too much. And trust your intuitions. And how to develop these intuitions? We have methods of civilizing the inner man. The culture of the inner man can be civilized by a certain process of meditation, pranayama, and various other things which will detach the consciousness from the limitations of Prakriti, the impulse of Prakriti. This is the highest culture that the highest contribution to the world from Indian ascetic tradition is that.
Since you are going straight from here to lay the foundation stone for a block that will house the Center for Advanced Scientific Studies, I'm going to let you have the last word and ask you to say something about the manner in which you would like to see scientific research conducted in India with a strand of wisdom and humility which behoves our tradition.
Sir, whenever a program man offers a program in science PhD in a Western university, they'll ask you to read Goodell, Asher and Back. See, humanitarian studies are the source of the foundations of education in wisdom. How human race has survived despite a self-certifying instinct in man, the suicidal tendency in man, how we have surmounted that, and how the Buddhism is purely Upanishadic.
Yes, I know.
Upanishadic. And how Buddha said this. In fact, in the Brahmana Vagga, in the Sutta Pitaka, there is a definition of what a Brahmin is. It is not by birth, by matted hair. He says, what is the qualification? Everyone can raise to it in his own lifetime by a kind of a discipline that will alone ensure wisdom. And secondly, the scientists' faith. Today, scientists themselves say, before we undertake a particular project of applied science, a group of scientists must endorse that it comports to humanitarian limitations. You can't say, well, I'll create something for a man to say, this weapon will destroy the world 25 times. It's not possible to destroy it 20. First time you destroy, there's no world at all for the second time to destroy. So once something goes out of control, something happens and there's the end of it. This finality, this kind of finality, unreversible finality of it, this is what we must keep in mind. Some mischief that is afoot will burn the whole thing. But at the same time, science, blessings of modern medicine. If I'm 85 years and still able to walk about, I attribute quite a bit of it to modern medicine, blessings of modern medicine. See, and children, see, polio, see what an achievement it is for a country of this kind of disgusting level of hygiene. How we have eradicated smallpox, this thing. My goodness, it's unimaginable, sir. We don't have the freshness of emotion to thrill at our own achievements and success. You still have a Gandhi, still have a Buddha, and we adore them. We put their photographs. That itself is a mark of great survival.
I would like to say, sir, it has been a very educating
No, sir.
morning for me.
The whole process, I must tell you, I thought I was educated by your great wisdom, the way in which the questions were framed.
Yeah, I now have to go and read so many books that you have recommended to me, and I intend to find some time. But I'll tell you why I feel concerned. And recently I came across a book called Command and Control by a man called Eric Schlosser, who never thought he was going to write this book, but he somehow got into it. It's a very fat book, and it fascinates me because it's all about nuclear weapons accidents, which by grace of God did not become disasters. It's described one in enormous detail and documented about 20. This one, which is described in enormous detail, happened in 1980, just at the time when they were trying to tell Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. This happened in a silo in Arkansas on the border with Missouri, deep silo. A 9 megaton bomb, hydrogen bomb, was sitting on top of a very tall Titan II missile, 200 feet tall. It's in a deep silo, the concrete lid is itself 200 tons, it is open for a launch. 9 megatons is something like 450 times the Hiroshima bomb. A mechanic was doing some routine maintenance at the top. A spanner fell down, hit the fuel tank way below because of the power of, due to the acceleration, the force was so much. The tank got cracked, fuel leaked, it began to burn. There was a calamity. Finally, the whole thing exploded. The concrete lid was blown out, 200 meters. The hydrogen bomb was tossed and fell 100 feet away, safe. If that had exploded, people might have mistaken it to be the beginning of Third World War. And there have been many explosions. Once a B-52 bomber exploded, the hydrogen bomb came and got caught on a tree. I've got a photograph of that. And so, by God's grace, we have escaped again and again. And this is only on one side of the Cold War. No, God knows how many there were other sides. There are submarines with their reactors sitting at the bottom of the sea, polluting it forever. So so I'm just sort of worried by the runaway spirit of scientists, and there is a group called Singularity which
yes. This is what's called technological singularity. Artificial intelligence will take a decision.
This man says humans have become very good at creating complex systems, but do not know how to control them.
You are absolutely. This is the coming Anthropocene era. We are getting into an era called the Anthropocene era. Human era has ended, where human wisdom and human restraint becomes irrelevant. That's why we must concentrate on technologies which will ameliorate suffering and promote human happiness. And that's the concentration of this.
And I think education has a big role to play. We must steer the ship with education.
This is where Baba comes into, his philosophy comes into it. We are creating monsters, intellectually gigantic monsters. See, only 15% of the world is innovative. 50% of the world absorbs the innovation. 35% of the world is technologically disconnected. And I think we saved ourselves from the disaster of economic meltdown in '97 because of our backwardness. If we had convertibility and the capital account would have been finished. It is that saved us.
So sometimes backwardness is a way of going forward.
Oh, yes.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
And I'm really grateful to you. We enjoyed. I'll get back to you with what our reactions are. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.